I'm going to teach you the sitting meditation. This is a meditation you do when the whole world's falling apart. When the phone's ringing, you got two phones, they're both ringing, and the food is burning on the stove, you're late for an appointment, the kids are going nuts all over the place, the whole world is falling apart. This is what you do, the sitting meditation. You sit like this. And as soon as you sit like this, if somebody else doesn't come, there's going to be a voice inside you that's going to be screaming, "What are you doing sitting there? Don't you know the whole world is falling apart? Don't you know you're late for your appointment? Don't you know the food? Don't you know the phone is ringing? Don't you know you have to take care of things right now or else everything's going to be a disaster?" At that point, you sit back and you do absolutely nothing. You just sit there. And when that voice keeps on screaming, you say to that voice, "I'm not ready right now to take care of the whole world. And the world's not going to tell me where I have to go and when I have to run where. When I'm good and ready to tell the world what to do, I'll get up from my chair."
Soma lecho nafshi Koma lecho besori.
Kabbalah is the innermost dimension of the Torah, a wisdom that for millennia only the most sublime minds and souls could benefit from, and which they passed down from generation to generation with extreme care since the creation of Adam. In 1796, Rabbi Schneur Zalman of Liadi brought this exalted science of Kabbalah down to the man on the street into a small book of day-to-day mysticism known as the Tanya. Rabbi Tzvi Freeman leads us into an analysis of the Kabbalistic understanding of the mind in relationship to the heart.
There was a disciple, a chassid, of Rabbi Schneur Zalman, the Alter Rebbe, the author of the Tanya. His name was Moshe Melz. Moshe Melz was a very educated man. He had traveled a lot. He had sat in the libraries of Berlin, of Paris, but he was originally from Lithuania. When Napoleon attacked Russia, the Alter Rebbe sided with the Tsar. The Jews were divided. Some were for Napoleon, some for the Tsar. He was for the Tsar. And so he asked Moshe Melz to spy on behalf of the Tsar in the Napoleon's army. Since Moshe Melz spoke fluent French, he knew the terrain, he was a well-educated man, he acted like a gentleman, but he was also a very great chassid.
He wanted him to actually spy for the Tsar?
For the Tsar, yeah.
Or for himself?
No, for the Tsar, yeah.
Oh, yeah. He was commissioned by the Tsar to...
Yeah, so what happened, the story goes, is that he was an interpreter and like a scout, he knew the land as well, and he was right there in the general's tents. And he had a cane, and he would interpret for them and give them, tell them about the terrain and so on. Most Jews were on the side of Napoleon, so they figured he was as well, and he spoke good French. Okay. He would engrave into his cane some certain codes, whatever, and somehow get the cane across to the Tsar's army at night. And so the Tsar, the Russian army knew where Napoleon was going next. So they say Napoleon figured something's going wrong. Why do the Russians always know where I'm coming next? He figured there's got to be a spy. Where's the spy? One time he bursts in to the general's tents where they're standing around with all the maps laid out and deciding what to do. He bursts in, he looks around, and he sees one person. Doesn't look French, looks Russian. He walks right over to Moshe Melz. He stares him in the face and he puts his hand on his heart like that. And he says, "You are a spy." Moshe Melz stands there calmly and says, "No, Your Honor, I am an interpreter." And Napoleon feels his heart is not rushing. He's perfectly calm. He must be that he's an interpreter. He can't believe that anybody could stay calm under this. So he left him alone. So after the war was over, and eventually, even though they got all the way to Moscow, they lost in the end. And Moshe Melz told this story to the other Hasidim. They said, "Moshe, how did you do that? How did you do that?" Anybody would rush over to put your hand there. Your heart would leap.
Napoleon All the more so.
How did you control your heart? He says, what are you talking about? The Aleph base, the first thing I learned from the Alter Rebbe was that the mind rules over the heart. And that's the nature of man. That's what he did.
It's interesting because today we would, espouse the other philosophy, that the heart should rule over the mind.
Yeah, you see, the heart is warm, it's colorful, it's full of beauty and conflict. And the mind is this cold Akabis computer machine that can do calculus and so on. Who needs a mind running your life? What kind of beauty is it going to be?
Well, we do identify with the heart more, I would say. These are metaphors, of course, the mind and the heart, but I think of myself as more, closer to my heart. To my true self somehow lies in my heart, whereas my mind is this thing looking down on me from above, almost like a superego.
Well, the mind and the heart really need to have a beautiful marriage between them, because each one has something the other one doesn't have.
And yet one of them has to be in control.
One of them has to be in control, and I'll explain to you why. You see, the way the human being is designed, you've got this brain up here and a heart down there. In between, there's a neck. Why is there a neck in between? What for? Shouldn't they be, if they have to be married and working together, shouldn't they be right next to each other? You're building a device like a computer. The two most important components, you put them close together so the communication works easily. So the human being's not made that way. It has this thin straits in between, thin passage, a bottleneck for the brain to get to the heart. It's called the brain-blood barrier that stops chemicals from getting up there from the heart to the brain. So there's a reason it's that way. The reason is because if the brain were situated right next to the heart would drive the brain nuts. It needs to have some respite. It needs to say, no, let me look at things from a higher perspective. Now, and the heart's going, no, we need to do something right now. Right now, the world, if he does that one more time, I'm going to kill him. No. Heart, I'm looking at things here from a higher perspective, and I see that you shouldn't kill him. Right? Just because he said that, it's okay. Right? Things are going to be okay. And if you do what you want to do, it's going to be disastrous. No, it's going to, I can't help it. And the brain has to be able to stay calm and say, you think you can't help it, because you're a heart. Right? But I'm a brain, and I can see you, I'm the helicopter up there looking at you white water rafting down there, and I can see what's going on, and I know which way you're going, and if I know that if you go the way you're planning to go, you're going to go off the waterfall. Right? So don't go that way. So go the other way. So there's got to be this marriage between them. The heart's in control of the situation, really. Because wherever the heart goes, that's where the rest of the person's going to go. The mind can be thinking all sorts of wonderful things, and the body will be going off in another direction. So the heart's the one that's really going to get things to happen. But it's got to listen to those messages coming from the brain. If it doesn't listen to the messages coming from the brain, it's disaster.
So the brain is more, depicts the brain more as of a kind of, like a Henry Kissinger, like an advisor, right? He's not the president, but he's the advisor to the president, which is the heart. Okay. Or is the mind more...
Really, it can go further than that, because the heart is reactive. Emotions. How do I react to this situation? How do I react to him? If this person does this to me, I do that back to him. That's emotions. Right? Some people's emotions, they're more kind and benevolent. They like to do nice things for people. Some people are more full of this bitterness and acrimony. They can't get along with it. They have this is how I react. You do this, I do that. The mind is proactive. The mind says, how should things be? If they're this way, why should they be that way? Maybe they should be like this.
Do I have to identify myself more with one of them than the other? Am I more myself? Am I more my mind than I am my heart? Is that more truly my personality, my mind? I would
say 99.9% of human experience is just reacting. We just react to our environment. Whatever it's telling us to do, that's how we behave. How people expect, what people expect from us, the personality that they give us, that's what we adopt. The only thing we use our mind for generally is when we have to balance our checkbook or figure out a better way to get to work, that sort of thing. what we think is our mind is really our emotions. To engage your mind in life means to take control and decide, I don't want to be like this, I want to be like that, and then start being like that.
Do you become, is it a matter of a kind of maturing process where you identify more with the mind then? When you're a child, you're more heart, you're all...
Yeah, and as a teenager, you're more, and when you're 20 years old, you also are pretty much so. At some point, you got to step in there and say no, you know, and that's what makes you a human being. You know, that you are capable of being conscious of yourself, to look at yourself almost as a third party. You know, I'm looking at myself, observing myself. This is what I'm doing. Should I be like that? No, I should be like that. That's within the capacity of a human being. No, the animals don't do that. You know?
Well, how much control does the mind have? I mean, the animals do, but can we exercise total control of mind over heart? Is that even an option?
It's not a matter of total control. It's a matter of when the heart's going berserk, you can still say, calm down, stop. Like I heard once from, that's where I got that little meditation from an emergency room intern. He said, one of the first things he learned in the emergency room was a little motto, don't just do something, stand there. So what do you mean by that? Because if you rush into the emergency room and you rush to do something, you're going to kill somebody. You have to stop, pervade the situation, and now I know what to do. I figure out what to do, okay, now let's do that. Then you keep somebody alive. But the heart wants to just rush, and that's how we go through a whole life, just rushing through life and reacting to situations.
Are there any times where that actually is more appropriate? Could there be, like Pinchas in the Torah, for example, the moment of zeal? Is that the heart overruling the mind? Could the mind, is the mind not susceptible to being too aloof sometimes, too academic almost, and does it not need the heart to take the lead sometimes?
What can happen in such a person where the mind has its place, the heart always waits to hear from the mind, then the heart becomes a different heart. There's something very deep inside the heart which is actually higher than the mind as well, much higher. There's this essence that's put into a godly essence that's there, but it can only be revealed in the heart through the mind. So the mind becomes like this gateway for the heart to find its true self. So when somebody like Pinchas, or people who have been great martyrs, great self-sacrifice and so on, it's often because of this. They've raised themselves up to this higher level of being, where they're in touch with that essence, and that essence shines through the intellect into the heart. Even though it's called the way of Chabad. Chabad means Chochma Bina Dasm, which is intellectual capacity of a person. But that's not, the point is not to get to the intellect. The point is that the intellect is the gateway to the true beauty of the heart. That's where you're really trying to get to. But you can't get there. You can't get there until you go through the mind. The heart cannot find itself unless it goes through that path.
So there is no time really when the heart can actually dictate simply of its own will.
Only once it's found its essence through the mind, then it can say. That's
interesting. I wonder why we're built that way. I mean, we're talking about two organs, right? Anatomically, why are they separated? Why couldn't the heart and the mind be a single organ with a single will? It seems somehow that the conflict is essential.
The conflict is essential because the only place where God can be found is in paradox. If everything is still, everything is just one, so it's this. That's what it is. It's something static. God can't be found there as soon as it has a definition. As long as there's a conflict there, and these things are so paradoxical, and yet they're one person, and they're working together. So in paradox, you have a window on God, because it's impossible. Heart and the mind working together, it's impossible. Yet it's happening. Oh, that's God. That's a godly being in that. So a person who has no struggle with his heart, or is in the same position as a person who only listens to his heart. There's no conflict, there's no struggle, there's no godliness there.
If you like that video, hit the subscribe button and notification bell below for hours of the best Jewish content online.